The Galactic Confederation of Advanced Species, GCAS for anyone allergic to five-syllable acronyms, prided itself on being the crowning achievement of cosmic civilization. That's what happens when you let species write their own PR materials for 12,000 years. This loose collection of self-important spacefaring civilizations had strutted across the stars like they owned them, which, in fairness, they more or less did. The Vraxians, with their 17-lobed brains and egos to match, dominated the political landscape. The Meorian unity provided the muscle, towering silicon-based warriors standing 3 meters tall and as flexible in mindset as the minerals they evolved from. And then there was the Zith Collective, a hive mind that controlled the galactic's economy by calculating profit margins to the 37th decimal place. Other member species existed, of course, but these three ran the show through the time-honored tradition of interstellar diplomacy, thinly veiled threats wrapped in flowery pleasantries. Then humanity arrived, crashing the party with all the subtlety of a supernova. Just 60 years ago, the apes from that overlooked blue marble managed to stumble upon faster-than-light travel. The Vraxians still maintain it was a fluke. The official First Contact report described humans as emotionally erratic bipeds with inconsistent behavior and alarming unpredictability. The unofficial report summed it up more concisely: absolutely insufferable. The Confederation wasn't sure whether to pat these upstart mammals on their fuzzy heads or quarantine their entire solar system. In the end, they chose the diplomatic route: provisional membership, galactic code for "you can sit at the grown-ups table, but don't touch anything." What followed was the cosmic equivalent of bringing a toddler to a physics symposium. Humans questioned centuries-old constants, disregarded sacred protocols, and even had the gall to suggest improvements to systems perfected before their species discovered agriculture. The Confederation watched humanity's technological leapfrogging with the horrified awe of someone watching a monkey operate a particle accelerator, equal parts dread and reluctant admiration. And none of that explains how a human ended up in the most secure detention facility in the Orion Arm, sobbing in a cell built to contain genocidal Meorian warlords. We'll get to that. The thing nobody mentions in the Confederation's glossy recruitment holovids is how catastrophically bad they are at understanding anything outside their neat little classifications. Every sentient species encountered had been analyzed, categorized, and boxed. Logic-driven like the Vraxians, warrior cultures like the Millerans, collective minds like the Zith. Then came humans, who defied classification as thoroughly as they defied caution. And that, dear observer, is why the most predictable surprise in galactic history is about to unfold. Because the Confederation let the human cry in her prison cell, and they forgot what happens when she stops. She wasn't anyone special, just a mid-level diplomatic aide, with clearance barely high enough to access the cafeteria schematics. No combat experience, basic xenocultural training. According to her file, she posed as much of a threat as a houseplant. She was caught snooping in restricted databases at the Vraxian embassy on Centauri Prime. The contents are sealed under 17 overlapping security clearances, but rumors among the guards suggested something about star charts. Charts of uninhabited systems that the Confederation was very invested in keeping that way. Deporting her with a nasty gram would have sufficed. But the Vraxians, still bitter over a recent trade deal that left them with the economic equivalent of Spacelint, wanted to set an example. So they shipped her off to Tartarus. Tartarus was not built for humans. This charming hellhole was carved into the core of a dead moon orbiting a neutron star, designed for the galaxy's worst: mind-benders, acid secretors, beings that could snap a battleship in half with a sneeze. Her cell was a 10 by 10 cube of sterile gray with one dim light panel and air that tasted like industrial cleaner. Gravity was set at 1.3 Earth standard, enough to make her joints ache but not enough to kill her. Thoughtful, her guards were Dryax enforcers, 4-armed reptiloids with reinforced exoskeletons and precisely zero empathy. Their clicks and whistles translated to charming commands like "remain still" and "feeding period initiated." From the moment she was locked in, she began to cry. The guards thought it was a medical issue, some sort of eye hemorrhage. 3 scanners and 1 bewildered Z physician later, the diagnosis came in: standard human emotional response. The Dryax were disgusted. The Vraxian administrator deemed it primitive. The Meorian security chief called it tactically unsound. After all, why would any creature evolve to blur its vision during stress? For 3 full cycles she curled up in her cell, periodically leaking fluid from her eyes and making those strange hitching sounds with her lungs. The guards started a betting pool on how long she could cry before dehydration set in. "She's broken," declared the Vraxian administrator after reviewing the footage. "Emotional instability has compromised cognitive function. Threat level downgraded. Security protocols for the human wing were reduced by 60%. Surveillance was cut." No one noticed the exact moment when the tears stopped, and something else entirely replaced them. Following what became known as the leakage incident, the Tartarus Scientific Division held an emergency symposium on human physiology. Imagine a room of the galaxy's brightest minds gaping at holographic projections of tear ducts, like archaeologists uncovering a rubber duck in a tomb. The secretion is primarily water, sodium chloride, and trace proteins, explained Chief Xenobiologist Crax Voon, all 17 brain lobes fixated on the wrong conclusion. Most curiously, it contains leucine and kephalin, a natural analgesic. They self-medicate through their own ocular fluids. A Meorian security analyst raised a crystalline appendage. "So, a biological weapon?" "No," Crax Voon scoffed. "It's harmless, just wildly inefficient. They deliberately impair vision during distress, evolutionary madness." A Zith representative, humming through a hovering translator, added, "Our models predicted human extinction within 300 years of spaceflight due to their irrationality. Perhaps this function explains their survival." Emotional distress, Voon continued, pronouncing it like a disease. "They leak when sad. They laugh when happy. Completely nonsensical." Meanwhile, in the observation booth, 2 Dryax guards conducted their own analysis. "The squishy one has leaked for 3 cycles," the senior said, his mandibles twitching, in mild disgust. "No previous species has produced fluid this long without damage," said the junior. "Maybe it absorbs moisture from the air like a Neptunian fog drinker." "Doubtful. It eats the nutrient paste, inefficiently." The senior gestured to a half-eaten tray. "They have primitive digestive systems. The surveillance system updated its profile, species, human classification, D9 weaknesses, emotional instability, sensory impairment, poor hydration efficiency, physically frail, minimal natural defenses. Strengths, none observed. Recommendation, routine monitoring, no special containment required." "Oh," the junior added, scanning the cultural dossier. "Did you know they spend a third of their lives in a dormant state called sleep?" "They just shut down for hours," the senior snorted. "And they reach space?" "The universe has a warped sense of humor." Both guards turned to the feed. The human had stopped crying. She now sat perfectly still on the edge of her sleeping platform, staring at nothing. "Entering dormant state," the senior muttered. But she wasn't sleeping, and for the first time in 3 cycles she blinked and smiled. It happened during the artificial night cycle at Tartarus, the moment the tears stopped. Not gradually, not with hiccups fading into exhausted sleep like the Vraxian behavioral models predicted. No, they stopped precisely, like a switch had been thrown. The human raised her head, wiped her face on the sleeve of her detention uniform and smiled. But not the friendly, diplomatic smile typical of humans. This one was sharper, thin, feral, the kind of expression a Morian hunting cat might give if it ever evolved facial muscles. The night shift observer, a junior Zith on its first assignment, flagged the change as the conclusion of an emotional instability episode. It logged the event and went back to simultaneously monitoring 17 other inmates while solving prime number puzzles for fun. At exactly Oro 3:47 facility time, the human began to stretch, methodically. From neck to toes, every muscle group activated with clinical precision. The Surveillance 6 noted it as a minor anomaly, likely just physical discomfort after 3 days curled up in a corner. What it didn't register, and what the Zith missed, was how she surveyed the cell during those stretches. How her eyes lingered on wall seams, how she tracked vibrations to time guard patrols, how she measured. At 04:15, she visited the hygiene station and spent 17 minutes grooming. Routine. But not the way she tested the flow rate of the water or gauged its temperature right up to the overuse warning. Subtle details, all logged as unimportant. When the shifts changed, the Zith noted, "Subject stable, emotional purge complete." "Typical," replied the incoming Drexel guard. "Humans burn hot, then fizzle out." By morning, she sat calmly on her cot, answering guard queries with docile nods. The chief medical officer observed and declared her adaptation complete. "They bend, but they don't break," he said. His assistant updated the file while the human quietly tracked the medical officer's access card and memorized the rhythm of the door lock. Later, she requested reading material. They gave her a standard xenocultural text, galactic history and governance. A good sign, they thought. Compliance. Acceptance. No one noticed her focus on Confederation emergency protocols and security response sections. Why would they? She was just a human. Fragile. Emotional. How adorably wrong they were. What the background check missed. The Confederation's vetting of their prisoner was bureaucratically thorough, and therefore entirely useless. Yes, she was a diplomatic aide. Yes, she had level 5 clearance and basic xenocultural training. All accurate. What the 17-point intelligence assessment didn't flag was her former career. For 12 years, she served in Earth's Emergency Response Division, specializing in hostile environment extraction, natural disasters, terrorist hostage situations, collapsed mining colonies. If people were stuck somewhere they shouldn't survive, she was the one who figured out how to get them out. 3 of those years spent embedded with special operations units, training soldiers on how to escape captivity in non-Earth environments. The Confederation didn't dig that deep. Had they done so, they might have realized they'd locked up not a secretary, but an expert. The human condition. Escape as instinct. Most species focus on survival when captured. Submission. Compliance. Adaptation. Humans. They start planning. Their escape approximately 2.7 seconds after realizing they're prisoners. It's not just instinct, it's design, the product of a species forged by being both predator and prey on a brutal, unpredictable world. Yes, her tears had been real, but also tactical. Every sob masked careful surveillance, every breakdown a misdirection. By day 4, she had mapped the cell block, the 6-second blind spot during surveillance recalibration, the maintenance panel secured with non-human standard bolts. The medical officer's carelessly pocketed ID card. Even the food became a tool. Tartarus served nutrient paste, technically edible, barely palatable. What the staff didn't know, the binding agents reacted with human saliva, creating a pliable, clay-like substance. Each meal she saved a portion under her tongue. By night she molded tools under her bunk, camouflaged against the wall. Day 5. She had a complete makeshift toolkit. Confederation materials science had never tested human, digestive enzymes against their compounds. Their oversight, her edge. During exercise, she studied the Meorian Guard's crystal armor, noting how it refracted light, an exploitable weakness. During reading hours, she memorized emergency containment procedures, particularly how the facility reacted to atmospheric contamination, the setup. She shows signs of positive adaptation, said the behavioral specialist, a smug Vraxian proud of his psychological acumen. Recommendation: maintain current security level. That night, during the 47-second surveillance diagnostic window, she dismantled the waste reclamation unit. By morning, it was reassembled and looked untouched except for 3 repurposed parts now hidden in her mattress. Surveillance logs showed she slept 41% of each cycle, within human norms. In reality, she slept less than 2 hours a night. The rest? spent motionless, mimicking sleep while strategizing every detail of her escape. The first move on day 7, during the weekly 14-minute systems diagnostic, when security ran at 87% efficiency, she struck. It started with a cough, a deep, wet hacking noise that triggered medical alerts. The monitoring VI flagged a possible contagion and dispatched a medic. Standard procedure. What wasn't standard? The glob of regurgitated nutrient paste she spit into the atmospheric sensor. It contained fermented fruit and chemical components she'd saved and combined. The result? A perfect simulation of a Class 3 biohazard. Within seconds, containment protocols activated. Red lights flared. Barriers slammed shut. Alarms droned calmly about lethal airborne pathogens. And no one questioned it. Why would they? After all, she was just a harmless, weepy human. The guard outside her cell panicked, precisely as the manual advised him not to. His secondary arms reached for his weapon, while his primary arms fumbled to activate his personal containment field. He failed at both tasks with a clumsy brilliance, unique to the Drexel species, whose anatomical coordination issues had plagued their military for centuries despite relentless training. Under stress, all that training crumbled like cheap alloy. Possible contagion in Sector 7G, the facility AI announced. Initiate lockdown, evacuate all non-essential personnel, containment team to Sector 7G immediately. While the alarm blared, and the Drexel fumbled, the human moved smoothly into Phase 2. As emergency protocols diverted the guard's attention, she jammed her handmade tools into the maintenance panel she'd been covertly studying for days. 3 quick movements, click, twist, pop, and the panel released, exposing the backup atmospheric control system. Designed as a fail-safe for life support issues, it was never meant to be accessed on purpose. But that's exactly what she was doing. Confederation designers had a blind spot the size of a freighter. They never accounted for prisoners who valued escape more than survival. She rerouted 3 connections, creating a feedback loop. Within seconds, the cell filled with thick white vapor. Emergency coolant meant to suppress fires. Visibility dropped to 0. Through the fog, the Drexel finally activated his containment field and cautiously approached the cell. Prisoner. Status? He barked through the intercom. Remain visible and compliant. She did neither. When he unsealed the cell, protocol-dictated medical emergencies overrode standard lockdowns. He expected an unconscious figure, overwhelmed by coolant exposure. Instead, he met a blur lunging through the mist. Before he could react, she jammed her hardened tool into a precise joint in his exoskeleton, the one most exposed to neural signals. Knowledge courtesy of the xenobiology text they'd so kindly provided. The Drexel collapsed, all 4 limbs paralyzed. Thanks for the security card, she said casually, pulling it from his belt. And the sidearm. She paused, noting the respirator. Oh, how thoughtful. She patted the paralyzed alien on the shoulder before stepping over him. Don't worry, the paralysis wears off in 30 minutes. Your reputation, though, might take longer to recover. The coolant fog billowed out behind her as she slipped the respirator on and strode into the corridor, Drexel ID in hand. Chaos bloomed around her, spreading like a well-designed virus. Tartarus's emergency response procedures were bureaucratic masterpieces, 17 layers of protocol, each more convoluted than the last. The facility devolved into orchestrated confusion as beings of all species scrambled with urgent purpose, desperate to appear useful while understanding nothing. In the command center, the facility director, a Vraxian with 17 brain lobes, was experiencing 17 flavors of panic. What do you mean we have both a biological contamination and a coolant leak in the same sector? He demanded. That's statistically improbable, one technician muttered. Probability is irrelevant. It's happening, the Zith assistant snapped, multitasking between 16 different teams. Also, we've lost contact with Guard, post 7G3, the human cell block. The director's facial flaps paled. Surely you're not suggesting... Of course not, sir, the assistant interrupted smoothly. The human poses no threat. Guard Zekharox probably powered down his comms to avoid exposure. Meanwhile, the escapee was making excellent use of the Drexel's credentials. Confederation security used biometric species ID to prevent unauthorized access. What it didn't account for? Someone possessing both the credentials and a biological sample of the species in question. She'd plucked a Drexel scale from the unconscious guard. That, paired with the ID, was all she needed. Slipping through maintenance corridors, she triggered minor system faults, just enough to keep emergency teams rushing between false alarms, always one step behind her. At Level 7's security hub, two Morian guards argued over the manual. Biological threat takes precedence, insisted the junior. No, coolant protocol overrides it, countered the senior. We're supposed to secure prisoners first. Neither noticed the small device the human lobbed into their station, a makeshift percussion charge crafted from medication capsules and respirator air. It detonated with a loud pop, harmless but startling. The Morian guards reflexively curled into defensive spheres, protecting their crystalline sensory nodes. She strolled past, casually locking the hub door behind her. Facility status update, the director shouted over comms. Explain what's happening, in simple terms. Sir, replied the head of security, we have 16 active emergency alerts across 8 sectors, equipment malfunctions, confused teams, and several corridors sealed under quarantine. And the prisoners? All accounted for. Except... A pause. We can't get visual confirmation on the human, but the cell still shows life signs. Those life signs, of course, were the Drexel guard she'd left unconscious on her sleeping platform. By the time a Level 1 security alert sounded, the Confederation's formal way of saying, "We're totally screwed," she was already walking into the shuttle bay, humming a cheerful Earth tune about jailbreaks. Not that the Confederation's cultural database had any frame of reference for it. Tartarus's shuttle bay held 3 vessels, a transport, a supply freighter, and the facility director's private shuttle, sleek, fast, and prepped for immediate departure. Guess which one she picked? Her final obstacle appeared at the ramp, the Meorian head of security, towering, crystalline, and armed. This is impossible, he said flatly. A human cannot have done this. She gestured to the chaos around them. And yet, here we are. You will return to your cell, he commanded, raising his weapon. This escape ends now. She gave him the same small, dangerous smile she'd worn on day 1. You're making a fundamental mistake, she said. You see a prisoner. I see someone exactly where she planned to be. Before he could react, she activated a device fashioned from scavenged medical parts. The shuttle, bay lights flared, blinding and calibrated precisely to disorient crystalline vision. The Meorian staggered, blinded, and she slipped past him up the ramp. The thing about crying, she called back as the doors closed, is it's not always sadness. Sometimes it's just clearing your eyes. The shuttle lifted off. Autopilot, engaged, obedient as always. Confederation tech prioritized convenience over security. From orbit, she activated a homemade transmitter, broadcasting full schematics and security protocols to a waiting human diplomatic ship. 48 hours. Later, the Confederation Council convened an emergency session. The official report, an unprecedented security anomaly. The unofficial summary, whispered across 17 languages. How the hell did one emotional primate outwit the galaxy's most secure prison? The Zith representative gave the most honest answer. We mistook her emotions for weakness. While we watched her cry, she was watching us. New protocols rolled out. Human psychological assessments were rewritten. Guards were retrained in human containment strategy. Too little. Too late. 3 weeks later, Earth negotiated new diplomatic terms with the Confederation. They never mentioned Tartarus, they didn't need to. The unspoken memory of what one human had done haunted the talks like a smug shadow. Back on Earth, in an unmarked government facility, a former diplomatic aide was training the next generation of operatives, explaining how tears were perfect, cover for observation, and how aliens never quite understood the clarity that comes when a human stops crying. The Galactic Confederation had learned an important lesson about humanity. Unfortunately for them, it was exactly the lesson humanity wanted them to learn, and not the one they should have.